What's up, everyone? Today we're going to be talking about this little Trident Maple. All right, well, if you haven't already seen it and you don't recognize this tree, go back and watch this other video. I'll wait. All right, got it? Good. Okay, so since then, just to rewind and review a little bit, this is probably a 6-year-old Trident Maple that obviously is quite small. It's in a nice little pot. It's not a particularly great tree. It's just something that I started playing around with a couple of years ago in terms of doing refinement work on a very small trunk to see how dense I could get it. But as I explained in the other video, last spring it had some growth issues, and even the initial spring growth was very sort of stunted looking, and after consulting with the lab, it was diagnosed with phoma, which is a pathogen that infects the vascular tissue in the leaves, and it was also potentially infected with a root pathogen that was affecting the uptake of water and essentially, causing something akin to root rot. Taking the lab results and trying to figure out how exactly to proceed was the major challenge, because the lab results told me what the pathogens were, but not necessarily how to treat them. And the problem with the phoma infection, which is characterized by kind of the leaves curling downward into a very stunted looking kind of back of your hand kind of look, not to be confused with the Trident Maple cultivar that curls the other direction naturally as a result of a genetic mutation. That phoma infection causes stunting and can cause dieback on the branching. So obviously we don't want that to happen in a bonsai, and when you send off a plant sample to a lab, usually their instruction is to destroy any infected material, which doesn't really work for us as bonsai artists, because as soon as something becomes infected, we're not going to just destroy it. We're trying to solve the problem rather than move past it with other plants. So to make an attempt at resolving the issues that this has had in the past, I did a number of things during the growing season last year. And just for the record, when it went dormant relatively early in the fall. I want to say maybe October, which is early for our area. And every single leaf on it looked absolutely terrible. They were tiny, stunted looking, even though I had already treated it with a number of different fungicides to try to get the infection under control. And those leaves were formed obviously when the infection was still active, but what I'm looking at now is actually a relatively positive result. So I don't know whether I have cured both the phoma infection that is in the leaf and stem tissue, or whether I've cured a root pathogen, or both. Those kinds of things are not easy for someone who's a grower to determine. But what I can tell you is what I did that has resulted in much more vigorous growth by this plant in this spring period versus last spring, when I was getting shoots, but all of the leaves at this stage were much smaller, curled, and really unsightly. So the first thing I did was treat it with a root fungicide that is called Subdue Maxx. Now, anytime you look at basically agrochemicals, you're getting into a realm that is sort of a gray area. Subdue Maxx is mefenoxam, and you can just Google Subdue Maxx as the brand name, or look up mefenoxam. It basically, fungicide is kind of a misnomer, because it doesn't actually kill the fungus. It inhibits the growth of the fungus and prevents it from basically attacking the tree as effectively. And just a single dose of something like that can have the effect of basically tipping the balance of the kind of fight that's going on between the plant trying to defend itself against an infection and the infection, it can tip it in the favor of the plant and get you a good result. But don't count on just a single application of a fungicide actually taking care of an issue. So after consulting with a number of people in academic circles, I was told to try also treating it with Propiconazole. Now, Propiconazole is sold under a brand name called Max, but it's also sold in generic packages like this one, or more generic packages like this one, under the name Propiconazole. And I will put that in the notes below so you don't have to figure out how to spell it. But basically, this is another agrochemical, and it's a broad spectrum fungicide that's not widely available to consumers, at least in retail environments, but you should be able to find it online. I would recommend buying the smallest amount that you can find because a little bit goes a long way. This dilution, my shorthand dilution on here was 7 to 10 ounces per 100 gallons of spray. And because this is a 32-ounce bottle, this would make about 500 gallons worth of spray. In a nursery setting, that's really useful, but for hobbyists who are just trying to treat 1 or 2 trees, that's really frustrating. Plus, these bottles aren't cheap. So either go in with some of your friends who are also doing bonsai nearby to share the cost of picking up a couple of fungicides, or find a really small bottle of it and try treating 2 or 3 times. Using chemicals like this, you always want to be very careful to follow all the precautions. And if you're not a licensed chemical applicator, you need to read all of the directions. The word caution or danger or poison is one of the key indicators of the toxicity. So when something says caution, it generally means it's less toxic than something that says danger. But read all of the usually 27 pages worth of fine print that come in the little booklets that are inside here. And somewhere in there, you'll find the proper dilution instructions. Sometimes you might have to convert units because if the instructions tell you how to dilute for 100 gallons and you have to figure out how do I measure 0.1 ounces, 0.1 liquid ounces, it can get a little bit challenging. Like, so this little measure here is 1 ounce or a half an ounce, but to get just 0.1 in there to do a, actually it would, yeah, 0.1 ounces would be a little bit challenging. So a tip is use Google to convert different measures. So if you type in 0.1 ounces, 0.1 liquid ounces into Google in teaspoons, it might say that it's 1 teaspoon or half a teaspoon or something like that, which is very much easier to use as a measurement. In any case, let me know how it goes. If you try treating your Trident maples that have that curly leaf sort of stunting with either Subdue Maxx or Propiconazole, share the results below. And like I said earlier, it might be a year before you actually see any changes in the growth of your plant. I'll be keeping an eye on this one for a while moving forward to see whether I again see any stunting in the leaves. And we'll see you guys next time.